Witness what it's like to be a non-binary pregnant person and then a parent. Hello and welcome back to I'm the Zaddy. In this episode I'm going to be talking about the 13-week scan, the bizarre cravings and taking time out from work. Up until now I've talked a lot about the process of getting here, the decisions and the appointments and all of the testing, choosing a donor and all the things that felt quite structured and thought through and a pretty much straightforward path in terms of process. But this part is no longer about the process. It's actually what it feels like to be in the middle of it, and I don't think that's something that you can really prepare for. There was a point at which I noticed something changing in me. Not in a big, obvious way, but just in a way that I was feeling about everything. Up until the 13-week scan, I'd felt quite disconnected. Not in a negative way, but more in a not quite believing it kind of way. And honestly, that feels kind of weird saying that out loud. I just sort of went about my normal day without really thinking about being pregnant. And that kind of felt totally opposite to how I'd experienced IUI and the process, and where I was constantly hoping to be pregnant and thinking about not being pregnant. I knew that I was pregnant because we'd been through that process and the weeks of symptoms and experiencing what it's like to be early pregnant. And alongside that, I was also on progesterone pessaries since having IUI, and I took them for 8 weeks after testing positive to make sure that my body would sustain the pregnancy. But the whole thing still felt slightly abstract, like I was holding on to the idea of something rather than the reality of someone. And then we had the scan. Everything went quiet and we were completely focused on the screen that the sonographer was concentrating so deeply on. And there they were, our tiny person. And they were only 6.5 centimetres long, which is just crazy. It's tiny, but they were there. I kept asking the question, how can something that small already feel like someone so big and have such a presence in our lives? And how can it make such an impact on my body and my mental health being that small? But it did. They did. And I just looked at my partner and we looked at each other and then back at the screen and we were just grinning. We were just so happy to sort of see them and get that confirmation that it was really happening, that they are really there, they really exist. And I remember trying to take it in and not really being able to. Like, my brain was like slightly behind what I was actually seeing. And I think that part of me was still protecting myself and not letting it land straight away, because up until that point it felt fragile, risky to sort of admit to the fact that they were there, risky to kind of get excited and be present in it. Like, it could still be taken away, they could still be taken away. And I think that was the first time it really hit me emotionally that this was happening, that they really did exist and they are in the world, and not just in our conversations and in our dreams and our future plans. The scan itself was calm and the sonographer was amazing. She talked us through everything she could see, how they were developing and what was normal, and we were just so relieved that everything looked as it should. The right amount of limbs, arms, legs, fingers, feet, and the strongest heartbeat. Like, seeing that on screen was wild. It was strange seeing our tiny person in that much detail. Like, it's the only time that will ever happen, you know, and watching them move around and wiggle and see their bones and their tiny body and their head and a little bit of their face, not really much of their face, but, you know, some of it, and kind of imagine what they're going to look like. The scan was amazing and I was genuinely so glad to have seen them, but it still got labelled as technically difficult because the baby wouldn't move into a better position for the sonographer to see them. And at one point they even turned their back on the ultrasound, which was pretty funny. We did get a few photos of them during that scan, and they've lived on the fridge ever since as a constant reminder that they exist. We walked out the clinic and I felt shocked and relieved and completely astounded, to be honest. And we kept saying to each other, they're really in there. Thinking back to the last episode when I talked about choosing a donor and how surreal that felt at the time, this moment, walking out of the clinic after seeing them, it quietly connected all of those things, all of those decisions and the uncertainty and the testing and even that positive test and standing in the bathroom and being shocked after we'd written it off. It connected all those things together and it felt like really satisfying. And you realise that there's suddenly a person in there. We created a person. And for me, those moments were really, truly grounding. I relived them every day. But there were more moments that I ended up focusing on. Cravings. I think people joke about cravings and make them seem funny, and they are in a way, because, you know, they're so random and really quick and assertive. But living through them is so strange, and I genuinely felt slightly unhinged. To go from going about your day to suddenly not just wanting something, but needing something, like it's the only thing that makes sense in that moment. Some of my cravings have been Haribo sour snakes, refreshers, Jaffa Cakes, oranges, Swiss roll and custard, and olives and mozzarella. Not together, separately, but still. And some lasted a week and some lasted well over a month. And I genuinely cannot tell you how many Jaffa Cakes I ate. My partner even joked that our child's going to be ginger with all the orange food that I actually ate. But it's like my body just decided what it wanted, and that was the end of the conversation. I didn't have a choice. It was, you have to eat this. And most of the time I would add things to the Alexa shopping list throughout the day, and my partner would pick everything up on our way home. She was amazing and never questioned any of it. At one point I was eating about 10 Jaffa Cakes a day, and I had to ration them, otherwise I would eat the entire box every single time I opened it. And the weird thing is that it wasn't even about loving Jaffa Cakes. I do like Jaffa Cakes, don't get me wrong, but it felt different. It felt like I had to eat them. It didn't feel like a choice. And I think that's what I found strange about the cravings, and because I'm so used to feeling in control of what I eat and what I do and how I show up, and the cravings just meant that I wasn't in control. I was so used to feeling in control of what I eat and what I do and how I show up, and this wasn't that. It was like my body had taken the lead and I just kind of had to follow it. My partner would ask if I wanted whatever the craving was at the time, for instance. And when I didn't, we would both look at each other and go, oh, is that done now? Like, are we moving on to something else? Is there something else taking its place, or are we done? But there is another side to this, and it's the part I didn't really expect to hit me the way it did. And it's not that I thought pregnancy would be easy by any means, but I had no idea how it would affect me, and I ended up taking nearly 3 weeks off sick. And that wasn't an easy thing for me to do. For me, taking time off work it isn't just practical, it's emotional, and there's guilt and there's pressure and a little voice inside me that says, keep going, you've got this, keep going. And I really tried to, but the reality was that I was really unwell, physically and mentally, and I was exhausted. And all the pregnancy symptoms and everything that my body was going through just kept pushing me and pushing me. And I needed space and I needed quiet. And everything that I've talked about in earlier episodes, the emotional load, it didn't disappear when I got pregnant or had the 13-week scan. It stayed, it lingered, and it just changed shape. The breaking point was when I was constantly crying. Everything felt so overwhelming and out of my control. It felt like the smallest thing was the biggest, most upsetting thing to have ever happened to me. And I lost perspective and the ability to self-regulate. And honestly, that scared me. I thought I was losing it, because I'm someone that is very self-aware and usually quite in control of my emotions and the way that I present myself. And suddenly I wasn't. I didn't recognise who I was, and it really did worry me. I talked to my therapist and my partner, And eventually I spoke to the GP, who suggested I take time out of everything, to step away from everything, reduce the stress and give myself space to rest, and for me and the baby. I did try to push through for weeks before taking sick leave, but it just got worse and worse, and I started to worry more about my mental health and what that meant for me and the baby long term, and it made me question everything. Am I strong enough to do this? Will I get through it? What happens if my mental health carries on getting worse and it declines rapidly? How will I cope with it all? But I think the hardest part for me was admitting that I needed to stop. And not because I wanted to, because I had to. And then telling people that I had to felt difficult. Like, I had to explain myself and justify it, even though I wasn't alone in it, because I had my partner and my therapist supporting me the whole time. It just felt really tough. Then there was the first day that I wasn't working, and instead of it being a relief, it was relief, but it was also guilt and more space than I'd known for ages, and what felt like noise. And that first day I did absolutely nothing. I barely moved. I tried to, but my body and my mind were just so exhausted that I didn't have space for anything, and I gave into it. And genuinely, emotionally, that didn't sit well with me, because I'm so used to being productive and tying my worth to what I'm doing and what I'm producing all the time. So I felt like I should be doing something. But the thing is, I was doing something. I was resting. I was doing exactly what my body needed at the time. And I had this quiet feeling underneath it all that just kept saying, the break is necessary. This is what my body needs, and I need to listen to it. I need to go with it. So I actually listened. And what I'm learning in this journey, in this experience, is that it's not clean and tidy. It's layered and it's complicated. It's seeing your tiny person for the first time and feeling something settle into place. It's the weird cravings that make absolutely no sense, and then somehow they feel super urgent. But it's also life being brought to a stop and being reminded that I can't push through everything, that my body has its limits, and that those limits aren't something that I can fight all the time. They're something I should listen to and respect. And I've really had to listen to them, because overriding them and pushing through them is just not an option anymore. Even when it's inconvenient and uncomfortable, I have to go with what my body's feeling and telling me. And that felt like something I really had to get used to. I think that's where I'm going to leave this episode. So if you're somewhere in your own version of this, whatever that looks like, I would really love to hear from you. You can email me at getintouch@imthezaddy.com, or find me on Instagram at imthezaddy.pod. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. Speak to you next time. Peace.